Hey everybody, how's it going? It's me, Logan, aka Suburban Yinzer, and the title of this video is going to be, why am I a Suburban Yinzer? Or what is a Suburban Yinzer? Or why do I call myself that? I've gotten a couple questions over the past couple months, almost a year, about the title of this channel being Suburban Yinzer. Not just from the locals, not just from people and natives of southwestern Pennsylvania, but also people from all over the country or all over the world. I've gotten messages from people from other states in the Union or other countries across the world that say, what is Suburban Yinzer? Now, this video is going to be my opinions, my point of view, my perspective, and my life experiences that define me as the Suburban Yinzer. It's not an official title. Nobody really made that up except for me. Now, with my unique personal experiences that I've experienced, I can identify myself as both a suburban and a Yinzer. Now, to go to the background, to start out from the beginning, before I was even born, my dad is from the south side of Pittsburgh. Okay, the south side is right along the Monongahela River. So you got Pittsburgh, the Point, okay, the peninsula. You got the city of Pittsburgh, and then across the Monongahela River, south of Pittsburgh, is Southside. And then if you go up a mountain, you go up a mountain, and you have Mount Washington overlooking downtown Pittsburgh. That is where my mother's from. My mom's from the Mount. We call it the Mount. But to many of the suburbanites, to many of the people that are not fluent in the Yinzer dialect, they call it the mountain, downtown. I hate pronouncing it like that. It doesn't flow. So my mother's on the Mount and my dad's from Southside. And then when I was born and raised for a couple years, I was born and raised in Carrick. And based on family circumstances and private things in our family that were going on early in my childhood, we moved to the suburbs, to the South Hills of Pittsburgh. Not too far from Pittsburgh, but we moved south into the suburbs. Now, feeling like an immigrant child, the child of an immigrant, it seems a little ridiculous to even say that, because moving from another country to another country is a totally different thing. I mean, is what it is. But to my perspective and to my personal feelings on the matter, to my opinion, I felt that I was a child of immigrants, because nobody in my bloodline moved out of Pittsburgh ever. Everybody was in Pittsburgh, even if it was Southside, Brookline, Bloomfield, Mount Washington. You stayed in the Pittsburgh area. You stayed with the neighbors and the people that talked like you, acted like you, worked like you. Oh, my dad works at J&L Still. And my mom is a stay-at-home mom who says, get out in the house and wash your hands in about a half an hour and that. Okay? That was the culture, the world that my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, going all the way back to the 1800s. That's the way they talked. That's the way they lived. That's the way they worked. You worked in the steel mill, and you talked like a Yinzer. You lived like a Yinzer. But when my family and me moved to the suburbs, that culture, that dialect, the lifestyle, everything that made us a Pittsburgh family, a Yinzer family, was then brought to the suburbs. And I understand many Yinzer are going to say, well, Logan, moving from Pittsburgh to the South Hills, or moving from the city to the South Hills, isn't really a big jump. You're only moving, 20, 25, 30 minutes away from the city. So shut your mouth. You know what you're talking about. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to make myself seem like a victim, because I'm not a victim. I'm proud of what I am. But what I'm trying to do is try to explain myself to try to beat some of the doubters and the naysayers and the haters that try to call me a poser and try to say that I'm acting like something that I'm not. The point of this is to basically explain my upbringing and my culture and my identity and my traditions that I have been basically living under my whole life. But back to my family. When we moved from the city to the suburbs, I was raised in the suburbs. But being raised in the suburbs, the rural, open, woodedness of the South Hills of Pittsburgh, the openness, the freeing aspect of not being condensed and not being like on top of each other, yes, is one thing. But the culture and the differences between the suburbs and the city are totally different. And I've seen the best of both worlds because I still have a lot of family members, immediate family members still living in the city, that I have lived the best of both worlds. And I've seen the polarization between the both. But my mother raised me primarily because she was basically a stay-at-home mother most of my childhood. So when children of immigrants come to America, they speak the mother's tongue. That's what it's called, the mother's tongue. Well, my mother's tongue was Pittsburghese. It was Yinzer. The culture that I acquired from my mother was from my grandparents of Mount Washington, in Bloomfield, in Brookline. Okay, I wasn't raised in the South Hills suburban, basically toast accent, dry toast accent. That's what I call it. Like in the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, they're toast. They're dry like toast. My perspective is people that live in the suburbs, no offense, they don't have the slang. They don't have they don't have that cool style to their language. It's like, I'm going to go downtown in an hour, and it's so bleh. But my mother, I didn't notice it when I was a kid. To me, that was just my mom. But as I got older in the suburbs, I was reminded of the alien accent that I had from my mother's tongue. But regardless, my mother would say, "Hey, Logan, get in the house in about a half an hour. Go wash your hands up in the bathroom. Or get a shower. Better take about a half an hour." You know what I mean? Like, to many a Yinzer, you're going to say, "Well, Logan, you're a poser," because you know that. Because you could see that. But I can see that because I was raised in a different environment. When you're born and raised and live in the city your whole life, and you're surrounded by people that talk like you and live like you, you're not going to notice differences because you're all the same. But what I'm trying to say for me is that I notice those differences and I see those differences because I was reminded of those differences. When I went to school, especially high school, middle school and high school, I was pretty much harassed in a fun way, but harassed because of the way I talked, because of my culture, my differences of the suburban kids. Not to say that I'm a victim and saying, "Wah," but the thing is that it really shows how different I am and how different I was raised and kids like me were raised for parents that moved out of the city and moved into the suburbs. We were kind of like aliens. Either you assimilate or you're pushed away. Either your accent is accepted or your dialect is accepted or you're pushed away or you're made fun of or you're harassed for it. When I was in high school, people would be like, "Oh, you're going to go outside, go down there and that, Logan. You're going to go get a shower in about a half an hour." The mocking. And that's when I started to realize when I was an adolescent and early teenager that I was different. That the way I was raised, the way my mother and father and grandparents talked, were not the same way that these kids out in the suburbs live. And that is the parallels, and that is the polarization, or not the parallels, but that is the differences between both of the worlds that I've lived in my whole life. Primarily in the suburbs, but at home, in the house, no pun intended, in the house, we're Yinzers. We're full-on Yinzers. We love Pittsburgh. My dad's still a Southsider. My mom's still she's a Mountain woman. all day. She's from Mount Washington. That's their roots, their culture, their lifestyle, their ancestry, their ways of life. And to me, I'm not saying I don't love the suburbs. I'm not saying that I don't love the rural, open, freeness, like a free aspect. You know what I mean? Because the woods and the rural environments of, the South Hills and Washington County. I'm not saying that I don't enjoy it. I enjoy the positives of it. But what I don't like about the suburbs, and many Yins might agree with me if you know the differences between the city and the suburbs, is I don't like the isolation. I don't like the dryness, the isolated culture, the neighborly camaraderie versus the city to the suburbs, and I've seen both, is totally different. It seems like in the suburbs, everybody's reserved, quiet, keeps to themselves, there's not a community feel in the suburbs versus the city. My mom and dad were raised in communities, in neighborhoods, Southside, Mount Washington. That was communities, the neighborhood. You know what I mean? The neighborhood. Everybody's dads worked at the steel mill. Everybody's moms were stay-at-home moms. Everybody talked the same, lived the same, acted the same. But then when we all came out here to the suburbs, that all changed. Because then we were like aliens. We were literal aliens in a foreign area. I mean, when I was in high school, I was the minority. I was one of the few kids in my high school that talked like a Yinzer, that acted like a Yinzer. Not to say that people aren't proud of their city in the suburbs, because there's many people that are. But in my case, as a young person in the 2000s, to be talking the way I do and embracing the culture and the dialect and the way of life of my ancestors from the city of Pittsburgh, that is something unique to myself, that I identify myself as the Suburban Yinzer. And for me, from my unique position, to see the best of the both worlds and to see the differences of both worlds, that's why the channel's called Suburban Yinzer. Because I've lived in both worlds my whole life. I lived with both peoples, both cultures, both dialects, both ways of life. And to me, at the end of the day, if I'm going to favor one over the other, which one am I going to prefer? I'm going to prefer the way of life of my ancestors. I'm going to prefer the city, Yinzer, gritty, blue-collar way of life of my ancestors. Because that's the way I was raised. That's the environment that my mother and father and my grandparents taught me. That is the way of life. To me, that is normal. Even though I might live in the suburbs, even though I might live in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, in the rural openness of the South Hills, my DNA, my heritage, my culture, my identity will always be Pittsburgh. It will always be a Yinzer. I will always feel sentimentality to the city of Pittsburgh and the neighborhoods and the communities of the city. All day. I will never betray or forget where my people came from. Ever. And that is something that a lot of people should take to heart and should remind themselves. Just because you live in a different place and live around different people, that doesn't mean you should forget and abandon your roots and your ancestors. Because I don't. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it was insightful, and I hope that Yins might have learned something different or learned something about me that, opened your eyes and perspective a little bit. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this. Have a good day. Peace out.